Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I just want to say thank you to everyone that subscribed, commented, and liked my videos. Please, if you have not subscribed, kindly click on the red button below to do so. Anyways, today I'll be showing you how I made this beautiful dress I'm wearing. It's a pencil dress with a cold shoulder and a balloon sleeve. So let's get started. Welcome to another interesting tutorials. Today I'll be showing you another method of how to draft a bustier dress with a yoke. This is the pattern I'll be using for the top. This is the front and this is the back. I've gone ahead to label the vertical measurement. So this is the shoulder to bust point, which is 11 inches, shoulder to under bust 14 inches, and shoulder to waist 17 inches. I added half an inch for seam allowance. So this is the front, and the back, this is the shoulder to back half length, which is 16 inches. The next measurement I'll be taking is the neck width, which is 3.5 inches. I'll be using 3.5, and for the depth I'll use 3 inches. So I'll just go ahead and use my pattern master to connect it this way. After doing that, I'll take the shoulder measurement, which is 15 inches. That is 15 divided by 2 will give us 7.5. I added half an inch for seam allowance. So I'm coming down by 1.5 inches for shoulder slope, and I'll connect it to the neck width like this. Now I'll be taking the chest line. The chest line for this measurement is 8 inches, so I'll just go ahead and connect it this way. Now I'll be going to the back. I used 1 inch here for the zip allowance. All my measurement will start from this point. So from here I'll take the neck width, which is 3.5, and the depth I'll be using 2 inches for the depth for the back. Then I'll connect it. Then I'll take the shoulder measurement, which is the same thing as the front, 8 inches. And I'll come down by 1.5 inches here. Then from this 1.5 inches, I'll take the chest line, which is 8 inches. So I'll go ahead and connect the shoulder slope like this. Then I'll take the chest line. I'll connect the chest line. So after doing that, I'll take the shoulder measurement and I'll place it on the chest line, and I'll take a straight line like this. Then after doing that, I'll do the same for the back. Now I'll be taking the midpoint of this line, which is 4 inches, and I'll come in by 0.75, that is 3/4 inches. Then I'll connect it like this to meet the 3/4 inches. Then I'll take the bust circumference, which is 38. 38 divided by 4 will give us 9.5. I'm adding 1 inch for seam allowance. So I'll connect it to meet this point like this, that is to meet the bust circumference. After doing that, I'll do the same for the back. I'll get the midpoint, then I'll come in by half an inch, that is 0.5, unlike the front that we came in by 0.75. Then I'll connect it. Then I'll get the bust circumference, which is 9.5 plus 1 inch. Now I'll be taking the bust span measurement, which is 8 inches. 8 inches divided by 2 will give us 4. So I'm come down by 1 inch from the bust point here. Then I'll do the same thing. I'll place the 4 inches on the waistline like this. Then I'll take a straight line from this 1 inch I came down with to the waist like this. Then I'll take half an inch on both sides. After doing that, I'll connect it like this to form my dart. I'll do the same thing for the back, but the difference is the back I'm using 4.5 because I added half an inch. So I'll come down from the chest line by 1 inch. Then I'll just go ahead and take a straight line from this 1 inch to the waist. Then I'll take half inch on both sides like this. Then I'll connect it to this 1 inch here. Now I'll be taking the waist circumference, which is 31. 31 divided by 4 will give us 7.5. I'll replace this 1 inch I removed here, and I'll add extra 1 inch for seam allowance like this. Then I'll go ahead and connect it. I'll do the same for the back, the waist circumference, and I'll just connect it like this. Now I'll be taking the side bust dart, and to get it, I'll check the difference between the back and the front. And for this, the back is 16 inches and the front is 17 inches. So the difference is 1 inch. So on this bust line, I'll come down by 1 inch here. Then I'll take a straight line from this point to the bust point here. Now I'll just connect it this way. So for a busty person, you can come out from this bust point, you come out by 1 inch, then you just connect it. But for this, I'll just take it from here to the bust point. It all depends on you. To get our yoke, I'll be taking the upper chest line. You decide how low you want the yoke to be. So for this, I'll be using 7 inches for the upper chest line here. Then I'll just connect it. So this will serve as our yoke. So from the shoulder slope, I'll get the midpoint. Then after getting the midpoint, I'll connect it to the bust point here. So on this upper chest line, I'll take 1/2 inch on both sides for the darts to tighten the upper area so that it doesn't gape when you attach the yoke. So I'll just take 1/2 inch on both sides, then I'll connect it to the bust point like this. Now to create the bustier cup, on the underbust, I'll take the underbust circumference, and for this the underbust circumference is 31. 31 divided by 4 will give us 7.5 here. So I'll check what I have. I have about 2.5. So I'll remove this dart. It's about 1/2 inch. So I'll be left with 2 inches. So I'll share the 2 inches on both sides of the pattern. So I'll be using 1.25 here and 3/4 on the center part. That will give us 2 inches. So on this side dart, or this dart leg, I'll use 1.25 here. And on the other dart leg, I'll be using 3/4 inches. That is 0.75. So that will make it 2 inches. So I shared it in such a way that this side will be bigger than the center part. So I'll be using my armhole curve to form the cup from the bust point like this. I'll connect it this way to the 1.25, and from this point I'll connect it to the 0.75. So after doing this, from this point, I'll connect it straight to the dart leg on the waist. Then I'll do the same thing on this point. I'll connect it straight to the dart leg on the waist. That is on the center part. So we're actually done with our bustier. This other pattern is quite different from the last one I did. So now I'll be cutting out the yoke. So this is our yoke. I'll be using another pattern to do this. Then I'll be closing the side dart. So before I close it, I'll open up this upper chest line, so it will further tighten the chest line. That is the upper chest. It will further tighten it. By closing this, I've succeeded in transferring the side dart to the upper chest line. So I'll just go ahead and tape it like this. Then after doing that, I'll just cut out this excess darts. As you can see, it has created more room or more tightness on the chest line. So when you sew it, it will give that part a good fitting and it will create a nice bustier area. Just cut out the excess that I don't need. So this is the side pattern, the center, and this is the yoke. I'll keep this aside, and on the back pattern, from the zip area, I'm going to come in by 0.75 to avoid zip bulge here like this. Then from this point, I'll connect it to the neck depth like this. I'll just go ahead and cut it out. Now I'll be using the front yoke to cut out the back yoke. So I'll make sure it's aligning on the shoulder here like this, and I'll just trace it out this way to get the back yoke. So I'll just draw the line. So I'll cut it out. So I'll be cutting 2 of this. I'll now add seam allowance later. So this is the skirt pattern I'll be using to join the top. I already have a video on how to draft a basic skirt. I'll be dropping the link on the description box below. So I'll just cut it on a fabric and show you. So this is the upper part. I've added seam allowance 1/2 inch on the center, and on the side I added 1.5 inches. On the back side also I added 1.5 inches, and the upper part I added 1/2 inch all round like this. Then this is the yoke. I cut 2, the lining and the fabric. I added 1/2 inch also. This is the back skirt. I've gone ahead to cut it out. I've added 3 inches for the vent extension. So this is the back, and this is the front also. It's on a fold. I cut it out and I added seam allowance. So I've gone ahead to add interfacing on the fabric that is on the top. The interfacing I added is called the hairstay. So I did the same thing on the lining. So to pad the bust area, I'm going to shape it from the under bust like this. I'll make like an oval shape this way, and I'll come down by 1 inch from this upper chest line, and I'll shape it this way. So I'll be placing it on this white material. It is a thick material called a wadding. It helps to give the bust area a bra lift effect. So I'll just trace it carefully like this all round. Then I'll cut it out. I'll be cutting 2 of this. So I'll place the shiny part on the bust area like this. Then I'll iron it. I'll do the same thing on the center part of the fabric. I'll start tracing it from the under bust. Then I'll shape it this way. Then I'll come down by 1 inch and I'll shape it this way. I'll just draw it out and cut it out. So I'll place it on the front like this, on the shiny part, and I'll iron it. I've gone ahead to iron the wadding on the lining, and I measured 1/2 inch I'll be using to join it. Like this, I added 1/2 inch. Please make sure you notch the bust points and make sure it's aligned while you're sewing it. So I'll pin it from the lower part here, because that's how I'll sew it. You start sewing it from the down part like this. So you sew it by 1/2 inch. Then I'll place the second one. I'll pin it up. So when you're sewing the second one, make sure you start sewing it from the upper part, and make sure the bust point is aligning and the under bust. So on the main fabric, I'll do the same thing. I'll just pin it up and I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. So I'll just go ahead and sew both of them and I'll show you the outcome. I've gone ahead to sew it and I've notched it. This is how I notched it, like this, before the stitch. Make sure you notch it before the stitch. It helps it lay flat when you iron it. So I did the same thing on the fabric. I also notched it and ironed it. So on the yoke, this is the yoke, this is the lining, and this is the fabric. So the good side will face the good side. Then I'll sew it here like this by 1/4 inch to the end. So I'll just pin it up like this. So that is how I'll sew it by 1/4 inch. Then I'll do the same thing for the back. The good side of the lining will face the good side of the fabric, and I'll pin it up. Then I'll sew it by 1/4 inch. So I've finished sewing it and I've gone ahead to iron it. I did the same thing for the back. I sewed it by 1/4 inch and I ironed it. So now that I'm done with the top, I'll be placing the yoke. I'll get the center, that's the midpoint of the yoke and the midpoint of the top. I'll make sure they're aligned together like this here. Then I'll just pin it up and sew it by 1/2 inch. So it will look like this when I sew it. So I'll do the same thing for the back. I'll make sure it's aligned. Then I'll get the good side to face each other and I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. Here to join the upper parts of the front and the upper part of the back, and I've ironed it also. Now this is the front skirt. I'll be placing the dart. Remember, it's supposed to have a dart. The dart is 6 inches. So after placing the dart, I'll join the top and the skirt together and I'll sew it by 1/2 inch like this. I'll do the same for the back. I'll add the back dart like this. Then I'll also add the back dart of the skirt. And I'll make sure it's aligning while I'm sewing it. So you measure it and make sure it's aligning. Then you join the 2 darts together. Then I'll sew it by 1/2 inch and I'll show you when I'm done. So I've gone ahead to join the darts. As you can see, I've joined the front, the upper part and the lower side of the back. As you can see, it's aligning. I did the same thing on the front. I added the dart. Then for the front, the lining for the skirt, I'll also add the dart and I'll join it on the upper part here. So this is the back piece. This is where the zip will be. So from the waistline, I'll come down by 9 inches here. So I'll start sewing it from this 9-inch. I'll start sewing by 1 inch, and I'll gradually start sewing it by half an inch until I get to this vent extension. I'll cross it over and stop here. I'll stop ½ inch before the end of the vent extension. Then on the lining, I'll do the same thing. I'll come down by 9 inches from the waist. Then I'll start sewing it. I'll start sewing it by 1 inch, and I'll gradually start sewing it by ½ an inch, and I'll stop before the vent extension. I'm not sewing the vent yet. So after that, I will iron the vent extension flat, because this part is quite technical, because I'm joining it with the line, with the fabric. So on this vent, you can choose any side of the vent. I'll just trace this line of the vent like this. I'll trace it this way. Then I'll come in by ½ an inch from this line I just traced. I'll come in by ½ an inch this way. Like I said, you can use any side of the vent to do this. I'm tracing it by ½ an inch, and I'll cross it over like this by ½ an inch. Then I'll cut it out. We don't need that. This one of the vents extension will not be needing it on the lining, so I'll just cut it out. Then I'll place it I'll place the fabric on it, and I'll take it to the sewing machine and show you how to sew it. So on this back piece, I'll pick the vent extension, and I'll notch this part of it, this vent area. I'll notch it a little so that I can easily flip it. So I'll pick this vent extension to face me like this. Make sure it's facing you. Then I'll place the lining on top of it. So this is the part we didn't cut out. This is the other extension we didn't cut out. And this is the one we cut out. So what I'll do is I'll still turn it over to face me like this. Then I'll pick this part of the extension that I didn't cut out, and I'll pick one part of the fabric vent extension, this one. I'll pick it up like this, and I'll place it together, and I'll make sure they align this way. Then I'll sew it by ½ an inch. Now that I'm done, as you can see, I've joined one side of the vent. So for the second part, I'll pick the second one, and I'll also pick this shorter part of the lining we cut out earlier. So I'll place them together this way. Then I'll sew it by ½ an inch. After doing that, I'll open it up. As you can see, they are both overlapping neatly. So as you can see, this part is open. What I'll do is I'll turn it open like this. I'll pick the lining and also the fabric together like this, and I'll sew it by ½ inch. So after doing that, I'll open it up. As you can see, it's closed, so I'll iron it flat and show you. So I've gone ahead to give it a good press. As you can see how it's looking very neat and it's overlapping very well. Now I'll be joining the lining together. That is the top and the skirt lining for the back. Before then, I'll make sure I sew the darts. I'll sew the dart here. Then I'll join it by ½ an inch and show you. So I've gone ahead to join the top and the skirt. Before fixing the zip, I'll be closing the hemline with the lining. I added 2 inches for seam allowance on the full length. So what I did was I folded it by 2 inches. I made the lining 1 inch shorter than the fabric. So let me open it up and show you what I did. So I folded it like this by 2 inches, and I ironed it flat. Then on this side of the vent, I made like an angle shape here. I folded it like an angle shape. Then I turned it over this way. Then I ironed it flat. So I did the same thing on the other side. I opened it up like this, and I folded it by 2 inches, and I ironed it, and I made like an angle, a little angle shape here. then I folded it and I ironed it. So make sure you give it a good press. So because I've ironed it, I can see the two edge. So I'll just pick these two parts like this and I'll pull it out. So as you can see, I'm seeing the line. What I'll do, I'll trace it, I'll pin it up. That's how I'll sew it. So when I put it back in, it will look like this. So I'll do the same thing for the other side. I'll pick these two parts like this, the end of these two parts. Then I'll pull it out and I'm seeing the line. So I'll just pin it up. That's where I'll be sewing. So I'll sew it and show you the outcome. So I've gone ahead to sew it, as you can see. So let me pull it out and show you the outcome. So this is the part I sewed, like it's like an angle shape. So I'll pull it back in. So this is the result. So on the lining, I folded it by 1/2 inch and I ironed it also. So this is how it will be when I sew it inside. So what I'll do is I'll pick the lining like this. I'll pick the good side of the lining and the good side of the fabric and I'll join them together here on this part, and I'll sew it by 1/2 inch inside. So I'll pull it out and I'll sew it straight until I get to this part and I'll cross it over. So I'll do that and I'll show you. So I'm trying to pin it up before I sew it. So when I open it up, it will be like this. Or when I sew it, this is how it will look like. I'll do the same thing for the other side. I'll just pick this part, the good side facing each other together like this. Then I'll sew it inside. I'll open it up and sew it by 1/2 inch till I get to the end. Then I'll cross it over here like this. So this is the result of what I just did. As you can see, it came out really nice. So the next thing I'll be doing is to fix my zip. So I've gone ahead to mark 1 inch for the zip. So this is the zip I'll be using. So on the good side of the zip, you place it on the good side of the fabric. You make sure it's on the 1 inch you left. Then I'll just pin it up. So I'll start sewing from this first part. I'll sew it to the end. Then I'll turn it over and open the zip like this. I'll make sure the center part of the zip is on the 1 inch of the second part. And make sure the two white patterns are aligning. So I'll just sew it up and show you. So this is the outcome. As you can see, the waist is aligning and also on the yoke. So on the top of the zip, the upper part of the zip, I folded it to the wrong side like this and I stitched it. I stitched it up. I did the same thing for the other side. I folded it to the wrong side and I stitched it up. So now that I'm done with the zip, the next thing I'll be doing is to close the lining with the fabric that is on the zip area. So what I'll do is to place the good side of the fabric on the good side of the lining. I'll place it together and sew very close to the stitch. So I'll pin it up and show you. So when you sew it, this is how it will look like. So after doing that, I'll flip it over like this. The good side of the lining will be on the good side of the fabric on the top part like this. Then I'll join them together and I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. So I'll pin it up and show you also. So when you sew it, it will look like this. So I'll do this. I'll do the same thing on the other side and I'll show you. So you pick the good side of the fabric on the good side of the lining, then you just sew it like this close to the stitch. Close to the stitch, you sew it like this. So you get to the end of where the zip stops. That's where you stop. That's what I did for the first one. So I'll do it and show you. So as you can see, I've joined the lining to the fabric. So it came out really nice. So on this part, I'll be tucking it in and I'll use hand needle to tack it. Because it's really tiny, I can't sew that part with machine. So I'll just tack it up later. So I'll do the same thing on the front part or on the front piece. I'll fold it this way. This is how it will be. So I'll take the good side of the lining and I'll pick these two parts I stitched here and I'll turn it over this way. Then I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. So I'll pin it up and show you. So when I sew it, this is how it will be. Now I'll be joining the back and the front together on the shoulder. So to achieve that, I'll open it up this way. I'll open the front piece and the back piece on the shoulder this way. So on this part I stitched on the front, I'll make sure it's aligning on the back also. Then I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. Let me pin it up. I'll sew it by 1/2 inch. So this is how it will be after sewing it. So I'll just pull it out. So I'll sew it and show you. So this is the outcome. As you can see, if I open it up, it's neat inside. So I also stitched the full length of the hemline. I joined it with the lining. Remember, I left 2 inches for seam allowance. So I made the lining 1 inch shorter than the fabric, and I've placed the good side of the lining to the good side of the fabric, and I stitched it by 1/2 inch. So that was what I did. Now I'll be joining the front and the back together to get an accurate measurement. So to do that, I'll take the measurement of the bust. So for this measurement, the bust round is 38. 38 divided by 2 will give us 19. So I'll place the 19 inches here. So I'll check what I have left. I have excess of 3 inches, so I'll divide the 3 inches into 2 and I'll place 1.5 here and 1.5 here. So on the underbust is 31. 31 divided by 2 will give us 15.5. So I'll place the 15.5 here. So I have excess. I have about 2.5. I have about 2.5, so I'll divide the 2.5 into 2. I'll place 1.25 here and 1.25 here. So on the waist is also 31. 31 divided by 2 will give us 15.5. So I'll mark the 15.5 here. Then I'll check what I have. I have excess of 2 inches. So I'll divide the 2 inches into 2 and place 1 inch here and 1 inch here. So on the hip, I'll do the same thing. The hip is 41. 41 divided by 2 will give us 20.5 here. So when I mark the 20.5, I have excess of 3 inches. So I'll divide the 3 inches into 2. I'll place 1.5 here and 1.5 on the other side. So I'll take the 1.5 to the full length. I've gone ahead to mark out the measurements. As you can see, so I'm sewing the lining and lining together. That is front lining and back lining. So I'll sew it. I'm going to sew it till I get to the full length. When I get to this point, I'll make sure it's aligning here, and I'll cross over to the fabric and I'll sew it to the end. I'll do the same on the other side and show you. So I've joined it. I've joined the front and back together. So this is the lining. This is how it came out. Very neat. Please make sure you test it before fixing the sleeve. So now I'll be cutting the sleeve. So this is our basic sleeve. I already have a video on how to draft a basic sleeve. I'll be dropping the link on the description box below. So what I'll do is, from the cap height here, I'll come down by either 1.5 or 2 inches. It depends on you. You can even go down up to 3 inches. But for this, I'll come down by 1.5 inches. So I'll just draw it out like this. Then I'll cut it out. To get the lower part of the sleeve, I'll be using 15 inches for that. So the lower part, the balloon sleeve will be 15 inches. So I'll deduct the 1.5 I cut out earlier, and I'll take the 15 inches here, and I'll just rule it out. So I'll cut through it. I'll be cutting this out. So this part will be the lower sleeve, and I'll be doing a slashing and spread method for this part to achieve our balloon sleeve. So I'll take 1.5 from the center line here and 1.5 here. So that will be 3 inches. I'll do the same thing here, 1.5 inches here and 1.5 inches here. So I'll just take a straight line. So after doing that, I'll measure what I have here. I have about 5 inches. So I'll be taking 1.5 here and also 1.5 here. So I'll do the same thing on the other side. I'll place the 1.5. So I'll just draw the line out. So after rolling it out, I'll place it on another pattern. I took a straight line on this new pattern because when I slash it, I'll make sure the lower part of the sleeve is on that line, so that it will be equal rather. So I'll place it on this line. So this is the center piece. So I'll make sure I tape it on the other pattern. So I'll take 2.5 inches here. So I'll place this other side by 2.5 inches. Then on the lower part, I'll make it 5 inches. I'll double it so it will be 5 inches. You can use up to, it depends on how wide you want it. You can even use up to 10 if you want. So I've gone ahead to spread it and I've labeled it. This is the center. So I used 2.5 on the top part of the sleeve and I used 5 inches on the lower part of the sleeve. So what I'll do next is to trace it. I'll just shape it like this. So after shaping it, I'll cut through it. So this is our pattern. I'll be cutting it on the fabric and I'll show you. So I've gone ahead to cut the lower part of the sleeve. I cut out 2 pieces. This is the lining and this is the fabric. So I'll be using the lining to turn it later. Then this is the upper part, the one I did the slash and spread method. I'll be sewing it later and I'll show you. Now I will go back to the dress. On the armhole from the shoulder, I will come down by 2 or 3 inches. This part is a bit confusing. To close the upper sleeve, I will turn it over this way. The good side of the lining will face the fabric on this center point that is sewn. Then I'll use my pin to hold it. So let's assume that I've sewn it. So this is how it will come out. Like this. Then on this point, on this part that is sewn, this place, this is where the sleeve will start. This is where I'll fix the sleeve. Then I'll sew it around and stop on this other point. Now on the main sleeve, you can either pleat or gather it. So I'll pleat it to have about 12 inches. The round I'm working with is 12 inches. So on a fold, the lower sleeve on a fold, I'll take 6 inches here. Then I have excess of 1 inch. Then I'll stitch it up and I'll gather this to have 12 inches. Remember, it's on a fold. So to turn the lower part with the lining, I'll join the good side to face each other this way and I'll sew it by half an inch. Then I'll flip it like this and I'll sew it by 1 inch. So I've fixed the sleeve. So this is the 2 lower parts. And this is where I gathered this by 12 inches. So I'll tuck it in like this. I'll tuck it in. The lower sleeve will be inside this way. And I'll open it up here. Then I'll sew it round. So let me pin it up. So if I sew it, after sewing it, it will be like this. So I've sewn this upper part of the dress. I decided to use 6 inches to do that. So on this sleeve, I'll be using 3 inches on a fold. So that will be 6 inches. It must tally with the upper part of the dress. So from this center point I stitched, I'll tuck it in like this, the good side facing each other. Then I'll make sure it's aligning this way here. Then I'll pin it up. So I'll make sure I get the line, the part I marked, this 3 inches I marked. I'll make sure it tallies with the shoulder part I stitched earlier here. So this part will be open. Remember, I've already stitched the upper side. Then I'll continue and stop where the stitch stops too. So while I'm sewing, I'll be pleating it up like this. Then I'll continue pleating it while I'm sewing until I get to where the stitch stops here. So I'll do that and show you. So this is the dress. I'm done. So I used 6 inches on the upper part of the sleeve and also 6 inches on the sleeve. So make sure it aligns, make sure they are same 6 inches. If you are using 5 inches, let it be 5 inches. So I joined it from this point here, and on the main sleeve I top stitched it by 1/2 inch. You can also use bias tape to do so. You can use bias tape to top stitch this part. So after that, I now pleated it round. So on this part of the slit, I top stitched it so that it will stay firm. So we've come to the end of today's tutorial. I hope it was helpful. Please don't forget to subscribe, comment, and like. Thank you.